Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Bob Wilkins. I'm the Warranty Administration Manager for Ontario Region. The course this morning is going to be put on by Daniel Larice. Daniel and his crew are responsible for the detailing right from the time those vehicles come off the truck to the time that they're presentable down there at the car show, and like 100,000 people or more looking at those vehicles. And of course, each day there are handprints all over them, and Daniel follows them around with his rag and keeps them all clean. Daniel's doing this now for us pretty well all across the whole country. So whether it's Calgary or Vancouver, so a well-traveled gentleman, and he's going to impart to you his expertise, and hopefully we can learn something. And I'm even interested myself. I'm going to stay today so I can see how to properly clean my cars.
So here's what I've got. I got my engine degreaser going. What I'm going to do to start prepping this vehicle, this thing just came off the lot, is I want to get started on degreasing all the fender wells. Door jambs. Now, when you're degreasing, what you want to make sure is that you really thoroughly rinse whatever you've applied on right off the vehicle again. You don't want to leave any engine degreaser on, because whatever is not rinsed, obviously there may still be soil there. So you want to be very, very thorough in this initial rinse. That's a critical stage, is right here. This is where it starts, right in the rinse area, okay? So what I do is when I start tackling a fender well, I start with the basic shot in the rear, but then I get myself right down and inside. Another thing that you want to make sure you're doing when you're rinsing is, that's too fast. You got to give the water the chance and the time to push the soil off the paint. So what you do is you find the line, you just follow it. And the reason why I'm doing this is because when a car is sitting in the yard, as it rains, as soot lands on a vehicle, it's going to land right in these crevices. So if I'm spraying my water this way, I'm not really attacking where the soil has landed. I want to get right down into these crevices. So that's where the wand pushing down to get that soil to flow down those traps and into the ground. Same thing with this window trough. And you'll notice that I'm always working the water downwards away from the vehicle, never up. Okay, now we start degreasing the door jamb. Okay, I've rinsed down, but when I'm doing a grill, I'm also going to rinse up. When you're rinsing a vehicle, is really making sure that you've knocked off all the soil possible. So what I try to do is I try to troubleshoot as much as I can with the water, so that by the time I'm ready to wash the vehicle, I've got minimal amount of soil that's on the paint to run the risk of scratching when I'm washing. By degreasing the door jambs, Now you don't have to get in there with a wash mitt. So you've eliminated that process. So this is where you save on time. The little time you lose on being accurate at your rinsing, you're now saving on time on the actual physically washing of the vehicle. So these are all these things that I do that allows me to do a very thorough job, but at the same time, I'm not really losing any time. What I'm doing is I'm just finding ways of making my work more efficient so that I can spend more time on the important areas, all right? The whole purpose of a wash mitt is to take the soil that it takes off the paint, but to lose it when you're rinsing it and dipping it in your pail. So that's why these things are going to stay fluffy, otherwise it's going to get trapped, all right? Wash soap, you try not to use too much. Too much is not good for this paint. You run the risk of etching the surface. So what you try to do is dilute it to a point where you're going to have some lathering, but a lot of suds really isn't what washes the vehicle. It's how you wash the vehicle that washes the vehicle. So bear in mind, you don't need a lot of soap to get the same job done that a little can do as well. And also it depends on the product. Some products require a little bit more. It depends on the concentration of the solution as well. In this case, it probably, because it's not a concentrated, I've got to add a little bit more to my pail than usual, okay? Flip the mitt over, a couple of passes, and it's ready for a rinse. When I get to here, flip the mitt over, wipe once, on to the next. Rinse it. Flip the mitt over, and back. See, this is where a brush doesn't work. You want to follow the contour of that bumper. You're going to stand there with a brush and be doing this. And all this time is lost, whereas here, for me, one wipe, I'm around, and through the corner I am. I haven't hit the car. The bristles haven't dug into the paint. And rinse. Flip the mitt. One wipe, and rinse. One pass over, one straight line. I don't do any swirling. And just as a precaution, I always do a second application in case you missed anything. When I chamois a vehicle, I never reverse my thrust. I always stay forward with the chamois because what it's doing is it's picking up the water as it's moving along and saturating it into the fabric. So the idea is to always be in a forward motion with the chamois so that it's catching the water and not leaving it behind. It just makes your movements more efficient and makes your job a lot easier for you. So again, the key is I wring it out really thoroughly and I start moving forward. Flip it over, same thing as a wash mitt. You're catching the driest side and you're just moving along the surface with the chamois in a forward motion. Okay, earlier in the program we were washing this new truck and now we're ready to finalize it. One of the things that I emphasized was the gentleness of the wash in terms of the initial rinse, using a wash mitt, not pressing hard when you're washing the vehicle, so that this way the result is when you're chamoising the vehicle off and you're ready to finalize it, that's where you save on time because you don't have any repair work to do. So if we look across this hood, you'll find that there are no hand wash scratches on it. Basically this vehicle, from what I'm seeing, doesn't have any factory repairs, so there isn't any buffing to do in that case. So we're saving time there. And now as you walk across, you see that the vehicle has some marks in the door from transit and a little bit of marks here, and there's some stuff that is stuck on the chrome. So that's the only thing that has to be done to this vehicle in order to show prep it for either a showroom or a customer, right? We've got the window rolled down a little bit so you can get the windows done, and then roll the window back up so that you can finalize it. As far as cleaning off anything that's on a window, one of the things that I recommend in taking these emblems and stickers off is you try to take them off when the window is dry and not in the wash stage. And I'll tell you why. In past experience, I've run into situations where we were washing the vehicle, and then with some steel wool and some soap, we tried to clean off all the exterior parts of the window before getting into the next stage. And what happened was there was some grit on the windshield when the vehicle was wet, and in trying to clean these markings off in the glue, we ended up scratching the windshield. So I realized that my number one rule of thumb is when you're dealing with window cleaning, you want the window to be dry, and you want your tools to be clean. So in an instance like this, I'm going to peel off my sticker, and whatever residue is left, I'm going to take that off with either Varsol, or usually a razor blade will do the work. A nice brand new blade, clean edge. Basically, I do my initial scrape, and that takes off all the markings on the vehicle, and then anything else that's left over, the window cleaner should get, okay? But again, the reason why I emphasize a dry window is because you know that that window is clean. So you're not going to run the risk of trapping anything between the blade and the window that's going to cause a scratch. Okay, the stains. My plan of attack is always to use the mildest method first before I get into the next to repair a problem. So I look at that and I say to myself, okay, I don't know if it's scratched or not, so why don't we deal with removing what's there first with the gentlest method, and then if there is a scratch, I'll worry about repairing it if that's what I have to do. So what I do is I take a glaze, or whatever show wax you have in your wash bay area, and I'll glaze that area. Again, taking note that I'm following the molding. I'm not passing over with my applicator. So this is where a finger application comes into play here. Okay, let's see what we have underneath. By making sure that I've got all the door jambs clean and done, I don't have to worry about inside the door jambs. The fender wells have been thoroughly done. All I have to do when I'm prepping a new car really is, once the vehicle is dry, is just dressing. So you do a quick wax, you throw some tire dressing on the tires, you make sure that the chrome wheels are polished with either a window cleaner or just even in the initial washing stage with the wash mitt and just basic soap and water. Glue residue that's left on this, I try to steer away from steel wool unless I really have to use it. The only time that I get into steel wool on chrome is if I've seen a vehicle that's got overspray from a previous repair or whatever. In this situation, again, wax. Stay on that area a little bit. And there you go. So the only time you get into steel wool is if this doesn't work. Again, you try to use the mildest method first to do your repair, and then you go to your harshest method when that doesn't work. So this way you're always playing it safe. And that's another rule that I live by. You always try to play it safe. I don't buff anything I don't have to. I'll try to repair the problem with either a glaze or wax first, and then if I have to do any buffing and compounding and polishing, that's my next method or a harshest system. What I have here is somewhat similar. It's pretty much Varsol or petroleum distillate, right? You want to keep away from any kind of lacquer thinners or reducers because it's going to melt the rubber, whereas Varsol won't. Varsol is mild enough that it will dissolve the wax, but it won't touch or damage the vinyl. Okay, so basically with a toothbrush, again, you're going to want to be careful because you don't want to start scrubbing into the paint. But the beauty about the bristles is it goes into the pores of the vinyl, and it takes out all the wax residue that you get from doing that. So why don't we just create a problem? Here's your typical paint sealer, right? Okay. We're waxing away. Bam, an accident happens. how do you repair it? Sometimes you get a little white haziness in the plastic like what you got there. So what I do is with my toothbrush, I basically work the area to dissolve the wax. A Varsol will dissolve any kind of wax residue that you see on your trim, even engine degreaser. So the engine degreaser that you have, put a little bit on your toothbrush, rub the area down, wipe it off, and then if you want afterwards as an added protection, throw some vinyl dressing on there to protect the molding. And with vinyl dressing, again, it's an issue of control. What I do is I put it just on the tip of my rag so that the fabric is right at the end of my finger, and now by using this finger to control my movements, I put my finger inside the door lip area, and with my nail I trap the edge of the rubber and I just follow the contour. So I'm basically pinching with my finger. What that stops me from doing is getting vinyl dressing on the paint, and now you're having to deal with it with a sloppy looking finish. So again, accuracy is really what it's all about. So it's all in how you just hold your material. Basically you're just wiping the section down, and then when you get to the edge with my finger here, just to control my movement, I follow it like this, so this way I stop my thumb from actually taking off on me. All right? And it's the same thing with this. What I would do is hold the fabric like so and put my finger here so that I'm basically pinching the molding as I'm dressing it, so that my finger doesn't slide off onto the paint when I'm doing any kind of detail work or trim work. Even when I go over the decals, I'm not really reefing into it. Okay, I'm being very, very light on the applicator, so that what I'm not going to do is push any wax into the crevices of the artwork on that vehicle. If you look very closely, you'll see that wax really hasn't gone anywhere where it's not supposed to. I'm not creating a ridge and buildup in areas that's going to take you a long time to detail. So that when you're ready to wipe that down, because you haven't pressed hard with the wax, you don't have to press hard with the wiping bonnet. Because sometimes, if your rag is a little brittle, it will scratch paint as well. So you've got to be careful how you're using your polishing rags as well. The reality is, this is a fiber as well. And no matter how soft the fiber is, it's still a fiber. So if I really was to press hard on the paint, I would create some scratches. But because I'm buffing very lightly and I'm not really applying any pressure, there's no way that I can create any damage. So again, it's all in how you handle your fabric and your material. I think that's pretty much it. As far as prepping a vehicle on the inside, usually when they come brand new, they're pretty much spotless. You just rip out the plastic, align the seats, make sure the dashboard and the vents are all aligned straight, radio knobs are all in neutral position, and if there's any lint, a quick little vacuum and she's ready to go. I mean, a new vehicle is pretty self-explanatory as far as prepping is concerned. So this is typical used car surface kind of environment here, right? So what I'm doing is, before I start doing any compounding or cutting, I want to put together a plan of attack, all right? So this is the worst area that I'm seeing here. I'm seeing this particular problem in the hood. So what I'm going to do is I can take my magnifying glass and I look at it and I ask myself, okay, can I fix this? Is this beyond my technical expertise, or is this a paint problem? Is this a situation where this can't be repaired at this level, it's got to go to the body shop to get painted? Okay? Now in this particular aspect, if you all can take a look, you'll see that the clear coat is literally cracked. Have a look. Alright, so obviously I can't fix that. That is cracked clear coat. What I can fix are the scratches, what I can fix are the swirl marks. This car doesn't have any acid rain, so obviously we don't have to worry about it, but acid rain is the same problem as a scratch. You have an etch that's in the paint, you want to alter the surface texture to make it disappear. So that's basically what a scratch is. A scratch is basically you've got your paint and the scratch has got a groove in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plane away the paint until that groove disappears. Whenever you go into an edge, whether it be a fender edge here or a contour on the hood or an edge right at the lip here, you've got to be aware of that when paint flows, when a car is painted, when paint flows on a surface, as it's laying out and curing, your thinnest areas are going to be where the ridges are, because paint never wants to stay where there's a ridge. It wants to flow away from it, all right? So these are your thinnest areas. The edge of a fender, the round edge of a fender as opposed to a flat edge, that's where your paint is always the thinnest. So this is how I work my buffer. When I get near an edge, the key is to polish away. You always want to cut away from an edge, never cutting in, because what happens is this. As a pad is spinning away, the pressure is going down and away from an area. If you cut into it, what you're doing is the pressure is cutting in to the edge. So what happens is you have 10 times the amount of pressure hitting that area, you have 10 times the amount of compound working, and that's where you get your burning. So the number one rule of thumb is when you're buffing, you always follow an edge, you never cut across it, and you always cut away from the edge, never into it. All right? So that's the number one rule of thumb that you think of. And if the moment you feel uncomfortable, lift off. Because if you're not buffing, you're not damaging, or you're not going to run the risk of compounding. So anytime you get nervous, take the machine away from the hood, regather your thoughts, put together your plan of attack, and then reapproach it again. All right? So that's the number one rule of thumb is always be comfortable with your equipment. The moment you feel uncomfortable, stop for a minute until you sort of like regroup. All right? It's very important. So what I'm just going to do now is just some sample ways of how I polish without any compounds, just to get a gist of how I work a fender or how I work a hood. So when I'm polishing, I stay flat, and I always work a 2-foot area. I never try to take on too much at a time. You want your compound to work. So you want to keep a local area here, and also for your eyes, it allows you to see an area, and once that area has been repaired and addressed, then what it does is it allows you to have peace of mind about that area, and you move on to another section on the hood, all right? And in order to see the damage, what you're using is you're using the reflection of the light. You use the light that's bouncing off the hood, and you stay focused on that mark until it disappears. And once I'm away from there, I know I don't have to go back, all right? So that's basically how I usually approach compounding a hood. So I'll work an area at a time, section at a time, until that area is done, and then I work on to another section. And usually when I'm buffing an entire car, I will repair the hood, then I work on to another section. So then I'll do a fender, then I'll do the rooftop. So that by the time the car is done, I know in my mind I haven't overlooked anything. In other words, when you leave a section, you should be able to leave that section knowing that it's fixed, done with, and forgotten about. All right? When I'm buffing on an edge, you'll notice the rotation is going away from the hood. As soon as I go into it, it grabs. And that's where you start getting your damaging occurring, your machine flies off, and next thing you know, you're in hot water, all right? The key is to not be in hot water here. Fender polishing, I pretty much stay flat along the edge. So I allow the machine to stay as flat as possible. And I'm following the contour. If I've got a scratch on the edge of the fender here, or if I have a scratch on the edge of the engine lid, what I'll do is I'll pop the engine lid so that it lifts the hood up, and I'm buffing the lid only and not the fender at the same time. All right? Because what's happening is, as I'm polishing away from one lip, I'm also cutting into another one. So you've got a risk factor there. So you always want to, really concentrate on what is it I'm repairing and how I'm going to tackle that area. I don't want to be polishing something that doesn't need repairing. Why? Because I don't want to take away paint where it's not necessary. So if I'm in an area where I've got 2 edges, I want to eliminate one edge and work on the edge that I want to repair. So there's 2 ways of either doing it. You can either pop the lid or you run a bead of tape on the first edge. So if you run a bead of masking tape on the one edge, you know that the compound isn't going to buff through the tape. And once you have, you know when to stop. So your tape is sort of like your warning signal. Okay? And again, this hood has got a seam here, so when I'm polishing, if I want to do some cutting, I'm going to cut away from it and follow that seam. Then I flatten out. Then when I get back to it again, if I want to tip my machine, I follow that seam. Then I flatten out. So that's how I would repair that particular area of the hood. And once I get into this here, again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow the rotation to be going with the edge. I'm not cutting into it. So the buffer is placed here so that the rotation point is right there. So the movement is away from that lip. If I allow my buffer to be here and I'm spinning, what's happening is the rotation is coming from here now. So the pad is cutting down into that edge. So you don't want that to happen. You want the cutting to always be taking place with the edge. So if I'm polishing here, the machine is rotating with the edge, all right? If I'm here, again, the rotation is always with the edge. So that's something that you got to always keep in mind. Always follow the edge that you're working with. An area where you've got a very thin ridge, what I would usually do is if I had to polish this area here is I would mask that off with some masking tape here. I would open the door, put a bead of tape here or some paper, close it, put a little bead of tape here. So now when I'm polishing, I'm only going to polish the paint. I'm not going to hit the rubbers. Because usually what happens is if you get compound in the rubbers, it'll turn it white. And two, it could alter the surface and burn. I've had situations where we were repairing a hood and I got a little cocky and took for granted that, you know, all my years of experience wouldn't get me into trouble. And I ended up polishing a molding on a window. And what happened was the heat from the compound melted the rubber on the edge of the molding. So again, you got to be really careful. The rubber is always softer than paint. So in knowing that, you've got to be a little extra careful about the trim areas on a vehicle, that you're not going to stay in that area too long. Not that you can't pass over it. You can polish over rubber. Just don't stay there. In other words, if you're polishing a roof line and you want to get near the edge to get the roof painted, basically I stay moving. I don't stop the machine and stay in an area where the heat can generate, because that's where you're going to start melting your rubber. So as long as you're moving, you're not going to overheat this area that's going to cause you a problem down the road, all right? So always stay in motion with a buffer. Now what I want to do here is I want to repair just a local area so that we can then look at the rest of the hood and do a comparison to see how those scratches have been repaired. Okay, now that I'm starting to do my finalizing and my cutting, I'll raise the speed up to dissolve the compound better. Okay, in looking at this hood, I can see that I've got to do some more repair work here. There's an edge that's got a bit more scratching, but you'll notice the initial swirls around that repair are gone. You see the initial haze? Now you've got swirl marks from the cutting, but that gets repaired later. What I'm talking about now is the scratch repair. What we're trying to do is eliminate the scratches. Then we'll deal with eliminating the swirls that the initial compound makes. Okay. Now what I'm left with is swirls from the initial cutting. All right? This is where I change my pad. Now I go into my finishing compound. See how much more watery this stuff is from the initial one? So basically this is almost like 3,000 or 4,000 grit sandpaper. It's so fine that it dissolves to a point where you leave literally a flawless finish. And it's so fine that it barely even generates heat. That's how fine the compound is. And with this, you can go slow, fast, whatever speed you want, it'll give you the same result. One of the things that you have to understand or realize with paint is once you've buffed the paint, there's literally no protection on that surface. You're dealing with very raw paint. So this is when it's easiest to scratch. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to eliminate touching this car as much as possible and let the wax do the work. So essentially, if I've done a local repair, the wax will clean up any water spots or anything that's residue. So this is where I get into waxing right away. I don't chamois the car, I don't wash it anymore, I wax. The wax will do all the cleaning for me that my mess has made from compound. Now you'll notice I don't use a lot of wax. This pretty much should do the whole half hood. Takes very little, not more. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm trying to work the wax until it's dry. So basically I'm doing 2 stages at once here. I'm going to wax the car and I'm almost going to final polish it in the same stage. And then just with a nice clean bath towel or a clean diaper or whatever, you just do it like a final buff and the hood's ready, you know. When I'm waxing a car by hand, I'm not going to press with my fingers, I'm going to press with my palm. And that's how I create an even pressure. In waxing a vehicle, where you're, yeah, well I only need that much here anyways. In waxing a vehicle where you get near an edge, when I'm waxing, I never go across an edge. Because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig the wax right into the grooves, and now when you're final buffing, you've got to go with a detail brush and get all the wax out of those grooves that you didn't want to get anyways. So this is where accuracy is important. So when I'm waxing, first of all, I stay very light with my hands. I let the product spread. And I follow the contour of a fender. I never go across it. Get into here, I go with the lines. Never across. Follow the contour. Now when I get into doing an area like this, if I've got a piece of molding here, what I'll do is I'll open the door, and then I'll wax the edge of the door edge. So now I'm not running the risk of throwing any wax unnecessarily on my moldings, which is the common problem that we have when this stuff turns white on you, and then you got to spend time, you know, with petroleum distillates cleaning that off. So open the door, wax your edge, close the door, you're done. And as I'm waxing, here's where I slow down and I just follow the door handle. That's all I do with my finger. I just follow the door handle, and then I leave it. That's it. It's done. And then I wax along the edge of the molding, and then I can start waxing the rest of the car comfortably because I know I'm on a flat surface. In terms of stains, tar, wax will get it off. Any kind of petroleum stuff that lands on the vehicle, wax usually has cleaners in it that will get that off, as far as those little types of stains. Bird droppings, that's usually an etch. That's a compounding repair. Acid rain, that would be a compound repair. Scratches, that would be a compound repair. But usually a wax is enough to beautify very fine scratches. It'll fill that in and make them disappear, and you can prepare a nice used car. When you're doing a wet sand and repair, blow the area dry. And look at the orange peel here. You see how the orange peel stands out where I've wet sanded? So if you want to get rid of orange peel, what you do is, you see how you've got shiny areas within the sanded area? Those are your low spots. All right, so if you had a scratch there, you keep looking for that shiny area until it disappears. That's when you know you've gotten rid of the scratch. All right, so basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep sanding until I don't see any more low spots in the surface. Okay, see how the low spots, the low spots have disappeared? So what I've done is I planed away the paint until I get to a nice perfect surface to repair. So had that been a scratch, that's what you would do with wet sanding. You would basically sand the area down until that line disappears, that shiny line, and that tells you that you've planed away the paint until you've gotten to this level on the actual surface. Now it's ready for buffing and polishing. And this is where a little elbow grease comes into play. But you'll find that okay, I work in a straight line to apply pressure, and then I'll go in a circular motion to work away the straight line scratches that the compound has created. So what you're doing is by applying pressure, you're forcing the compound to dissolve. Okay. Okay, most of it is gone. You can see that it still needs a little bit more work. You can get the job done without a buffer, if you really have to. I wouldn't recommend that you hand polish the whole car, but if you've got to do, for example, if you've got to do a local repair or fix a scratch, it can be done, all right? Spread it out a little bit, and then you apply the pressure. Then you ease off on the pressure to finally dissolve the product. There, gone. You've gone from a wet sanded area to a repaired scratch. So that's how you do a local repair by hand if you don't have a high-speed buffer. You take a little bit of compound, you wet your applicator, apply the product, spread it out so this is evenly spread on your pad, and then with pressure in a straight line, you generate the heat. And that's really what you're doing. You're pressing hard to make the compound get warm so that it softens the paint, to move the paint and to take it away until you've gotten to that lowest level of the scratch. And then what you do is, at the final stage, to finally dissolve the compound, you lighten up on the pressure in a circular motion, and then that takes away the straight lines that you caused.